Hi, everybody.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Hi. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome, everyone. We have a few guests still waiting to join us this evening, so I'll give them about 2 or 3 more minutes before we officially get started. But in the meantime, I'll ask you all to go ahead if you want to, either while we're a small group, you can go ahead and introduce yourselves, or we can put something in the chat to let everybody know your class year, where you're joining us from. Vicky already has it down pat. She already put her class year and her sorority in her name there. Love it. So go ahead, and others are able to do that as well, or they can enter it into the chat to start some conversation while we wait for other friends to join us.
So Vicky, you were in the sorority with Linda Davis, right?
Actually, no, she was
she a senior when you were a first year student?
She was not a senior, but she was not a FIMU, I don't think.
She was an Alpha Z.
Yeah.
Oh, she was
an Alpha Z.
Oh, that's
Thank
right.
you. Thank you.
Right.
That's right.
Gotcha.
Yeah. We were contemporaries.
Yeah.
Awesome.
She was a year or two ahead of me. But yeah, she was an Alpha Z. She was wonderful.
I like your jacket, Maureen.
Well, thank you.
It looks like you're staying warm in this cold weather.
I am. It actually got pretty cool over here in Pinellas.
It did here too. It was 51. And I know those of you who are coming from up north are saying, oh, that's not cold. Where are you coming from, Kathleen?
Unmute.
Oh, we can't hear you. Having some audio problems.
Aww.
My lip reading skills are not that good.
You would think with all this virtual programming we've had that we would all be professionals at it by now, at lip reading.
That's the truth.
Maybe we can put it in the chat there. Yeah.
So how come it's all women on this screen?
Well,
What
almost.
gives?
We do have Jason, Maddox, and Alex.
Oh, there he
I
is. I see Alex. Okay, I didn't see him before.
Yeah. So hopefully within the next, like we mentioned, with more people joining, we will get a variety of folks, different backgrounds, different organizations, and all of that, class years as well. So that's why we're trying to give people a few more minutes as well.
This is the first virtual program for homecoming this year, right, Amy?
Yep, for the week. So you are all our guinea pigs for the evening. No, you are starting off the week with us. So the first event, yeah, we go all the way through till Sunday programming. So a little bit different than last year's schedule.
And the 70s decade is right after this, right?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, am I in the wrong decade? What decade is this?
This is all
No,
decades. Greek
The
life.
70s decade reunion is 7 o'clock.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I guess I logged in early.
It's okay. We're happy to have you.
This is just, yeah, this is the Greek reunion.
Yeah, there were a lot of people who registered, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully we'll have more that join us as we go throughout the program.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I want to be aware of everyone's time though, so I'll keep an eye on the waiting room. Alex, I know, is doing the same thing, and we'll let people in as they join. But as Rena mentioned, this is the first event for this week's virtual homecoming programming and planning. So for those of you who are here this evening, we appreciate you taking the time on your Monday evening, the day after Halloween for most of us. A little crazy today. We were just talking earlier about the weather and kids being up late last night. So those of you, we appreciate having you here this evening. And we do have an active chat box. So if you all want to put in any comments or questions in there as we proceed and move forward, comments about where you're joining us from, your class years, as we've already gone over, and then of course, what organization you're here representing. So I am Amy Datis. Was a member of Alpha Chi Omega when I was here as a Stetson student. I graduated in 2004, and I am now the director here in the Office of Alumni and Parent Engagement. So being a member of the Greek community as a student and then as an alumna, this event this evening definitely means a lot to me, and working with my colleagues Renee and Rena on a lot of the Greek initiatives within the Greek community means a lot and is very close to my heart. So again, thank you all for being here. And before we get started, just feel free to stay on mute unless you do have any questions. Renee will address them, but I will turn it over to Renee this evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. So like she said, my name is Renee Dubois, and I'm currently the Associate Director for Campus Vibrancy, where I get to work with all of our student organizations with an emphasis on our fraternities and sororities. So I'm so grateful to meet with all of you tonight to kind of talk about where our current Greek community is, what COVID looks like with our chapters, and kind of the future of fraternities and sororities at Stetson, and answer any questions you have about our current Greek community. So a little bit of background about me. I've been at Stetson for 2.5 years now. I have my master's in higher education, and I knew when I was getting my master's that I wanted to work with fraternities and sororities. It is my passion working with them. So I'm a member of Gamma Phi Beta, and because of that experience that I had in my undergrad, I knew working with fraternities and sororities was for me. So after I got my master's, I worked at North Dakota State, where I worked with the fraternities and sororities there. Then after really hating winter for a couple years, I know we were just talking about it being cold here, put a negative in front of the 50, and that's how cold it was in North Dakota. It was pretty miserable. So I hated winter. So then I moved a little further south and got a job at the University of Arkansas, where I was working just with the fraternities there. And after not liking the SES life or SEC life, I moved to Stetson, which I couldn't be happier, having the palm trees in the background and living less than 5 minutes from a beach. It is beautiful. And coming to Stetson, the community is amazing. I love working with our fraternities and sororities here at Stetson. There's so much opportunity for growth, and they're so passionate. And it's seriously an amazing group of students that I get the privilege to work with. So kind of looking at our community. So since I've been here the past couple years, unfortunately, we have seen a decline in the number of students who have joined fraternities and sororities. This is actually a trend that we've been seeing over the past 10 years almost. We had a peak about 5 years ago, and then it started backtracking. And so right now in our current fraternity and sorority community, we have a little over 550 fraternity and sorority members. So again, compared to about 5 years ago where we had 1,000, that is quite a deficit in the number of students who have joined. Some reasons that we see these numbers being low: Stetson enrollment is down a little bit this year, as well as COVID plays into it. And we'll talk about COVID here in a second. But people don't want to pay for something that they don't necessarily see that they're getting something out of it. And so we are seeing that. And this isn't just a Stetson trend that we're seeing nationally, we are seeing that as well. And so we're trying to find ways to re-engage students, to reimagine what fraternity and sorority life looks like, so that we have more students wanting to join fraternities and sororities. So we are putting forth a lot more effort these past couple years in our marketing to really show why people should join, that it's not just buying your friends, which I'm sure you heard all the time when you were in, and it's not just for the parties, that there's so much more to being in fraternities and sororities. So we're really working on our marketing plan to help us boost those numbers. So kind of COVID and number talk now. Looking at last year, so fall 2020, it wasn't a good year for us with numbers. As you can imagine, people not being even in person for the academic year, but then also that virtual experience where chapters weren't really able to do a whole lot, whether that was because the university was saying you have restrictions, but also headquarters. Nationally, they were putting a lot of restrictions on what they could do. So we did see a decrease in our numbers because people didn't want to, again, pay for something that was a virtual experience. This year, for our sororities, we did see a decrease compared to last year, and which kind of took us by surprise. We saw about a 40-person decrease from last year. Again, we don't necessarily know why. We can assume because of COVID, because of university enrollment, because people have told us they don't want to pay for that virtual experience, even though chapters can do stuff in person. But that's what we have been hearing. And then for our fraternities, though, they actually had about 20 to 30 more people go through. Oh, I just muted myself. Talking about technology, you guys. So our fraternities actually saw about 30 more people sign up for recruitment and go through the process compared to last year, which is actually great. And so we're kind of seeing a mix there. And again, this is a national trend, not just a Stetson trend, that we're seeing lower numbers. And so again, we're trying our hardest this next year to really work to get those numbers up with intentional marketing during the summer to our incoming students, as well as having more solidified plans for those first couple weeks of the semester to really put Greek life in people's faces so they know what they're going to get out of the experience, instead of being like, I don't really know what this is about. I only know what I see on TV and in the movies. So we're really working on that. And then kind of talking about COVID for a second. So as you can imagine, when COVID first hit in the spring 2020, there wasn't anything in a transition guide for our chapters that told them how to work through a pandemic. And so a lot of our chapters were flying by the seats of their pants, honestly. Headquarters were trying really fast to put out resources, as well as NPC, the NIC from our umbrella organizations. They too were really trying to put stuff out there, and we're grateful for that. But now, being about a year and a half into the pandemic, our chapters are doing really well, and they're starting to get back into what we'll say is a normal chapter experience. It's very interesting right now because for our recruitment that we had this past fall, it was a hybrid of virtual and in person. And a lot of the students who are on the active collegiate side, a lot of them hadn't actually done an in-person recruitment. So we're seeing that kind of struggle of what does that actually look like? How can we work to make that better? And since, again, a lot of the students have only had a virtual experience. So we are working on that, but the students have transitioned great. This year, thankfully, we've been seeing a lot more activity on campus. Our fraternities and sororities are back to doing their philanthropy weeks and doing a lot of things in person, whether that's they're really into pieing people in the faces right now. And so I think in the past, 3 weeks, there's been 4 pieing people in faces that we've had on campus. And they're going to do obstacle courses. They had a talent show. There have been so many different philanthropy events that they've had, as well as brotherhood and sisterhood events. We're so grateful that we're able to have our students doing stuff in person, where they've gone bowling. We just had a fraternity this past weekend. They went paintballing, and we had students going to Orlando to go to different sporting events. We're grateful that they're able to start that back up and really engage their membership again, since the past year was very difficult to engage membership, since they're sick of Zoom and they're really sick of this virtual platform. They miss that in-person interaction. So we're glad that they're able to really start that back up this semester. And that's going to lead into the spring semester too. So thankfully at the university, our COVID numbers have dropped significantly this past about couple weeks. And we're seeing so much more life on campus, and we're very grateful for that. So kind of transitioning to the future of fraternities and sorority at Stetson. I am so grateful to have an amazing upper administration that loves our fraternity and sorority community, and they couldn't picture Stetson without it. As you know, we have President Rolke, who's a new university president for us. Been about a year and a half that he's here. And I have a meeting set up with him in the next couple months to really talk about the future of our fraternities and sororities. He wants to be there for us, which is amazing to see that happen, that he's really invested in the fraternity and sorority experience for our students, as well as our Dean of Students. She is very involved, as well as our Assistant Vice President. They are very much in favor of that fraternity and sorority experience. So before going into Q&A, I think it's a good transition to also talk about with the future. We'll have Rena talk about a survey that I'm sure you have gotten that really looks at the future of fraternities and sororities and that facility piece as well. So Rena, I'll hand it over to you real quick.
Great. Thanks, Renee. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Great. So as Renee said, my name is Rena Arroyo. I've been at Stetson for 16, almost 17 years, and I'm currently the Assistant Vice President for Development for Parent and Alumni Engagement. Prior to working over here, I was the Dean of Students and Vice President for Campus Life and Student Success. And in that role, I was the Chief Student Advocate. And I myself am a member of a sorority. You see Delta Zeta on my screen at Nebraska Wesleyan, which is very similar, a little smaller to Stetson, but my Greek experience is exactly why I'm in the role I'm in. I did not want to leave. I didn't want to leave undergraduate because it was such a positive leadership experience for me through my sorority. So it really impacted me and has impacted the advocate that I am today for Greek life. So I want to share with you briefly, and then we'll be able to take questions about a survey that we are working on with a working group. As you all know, we have aging fraternity and sorority houses. You also might know that our fraternity and sorority leadership, the students who are leading the organizations, have a really difficult time filling the houses these days. And as Stetson grew over the past 10 years, we made a business decision to purchase apartments that were just off campus instead of building a new residence hall. That was a really wise business decision that President Libby and her leadership took us through. And in the process, those off-campus and apartment-style living options became much more popular for our students than the current fraternities that are the community restrooms. So they're the shared restrooms, one restroom for all of the fraternity house. And the students have a lot more attractive options for them. So, and the other problem with what has happened with not being able to fill our fraternities and sororities with members is that when Stetson is at full capacity in our residence halls, which is a really good business model, Maureen, as our chairwoman of the board will tell you, it makes it difficult when the chapters are not filling their houses because we have to put non-members in the beds. And that's not ideal. Also, the large houses are not an ideal for smaller organizations or chapters who are trying to recolonize after being off campus for a few years. Something that's very healthy for our Greek system is if we have a chapter that has left campus due to one reason or another, we want them back. We want our alumni who are involved with these organizations to be engaged through their fraternities and sororities. So when they come back to recolonize, when they're smaller, the large chapter houses has not proven to be a really ideal size for them. And for our NPHC and Divine Nine organizations, we do not have ideal plot spaces for their fraternities and sororities. And to top off the complicated conversation, we have the off-campus Sigma Nu house and the newly renovated Lambda Chi house, which are different from the other fraternity houses. So it's complicated. But what is not complicated is that we want our Greek system to thrive at Stetson. With that in mind, a few years ago, Pike member and trustee Rich George, as the chair of the trustees facility committee, worked with Residential Life and Facilities to get an estimate on looking at the fraternity houses and seeing what it would cost to renovate just those fraternity houses to make them suite style, which would be a shared bathroom in between two rooms, which is what our sorority houses have on campus, instead of the current community restroom model that they now have. This would have reduced the occupancy in each fraternity and made the housing much more attractive for our fraternity members. However, as you all know, with the cost of remodeling and housing, the estimate came in that each of those fraternity houses would have cost $1.5 million to renovate in this manner, which, yeah, I see you, Vicky. I had the same reaction. And that was pre-COVID. So now that we have all of the shortages of wood and building supplies, it would be even more now. And if we did that model, we would still be utilizing those same houses that were built in the 1960s as temporary housing. And by the way, the sororities were built in the 1980s. Before that, they were in a building over by University Inn, which is now University Hall, and they all had chapters there. So that's an interesting fact too. So the sorority houses are better, but the women also struggle to fill the houses. So what Rich Benita Dukes, who is our AVP for facilities, and Larry Carell Hughes, who is our interim vice president for campus life, agreed to do was to form a working group to look at the space needs for Greek life for our fraternities and sororities on campus. So the Fraternity and Sorority Advisory Board formed a working group to study the space needs for the future of fraternities and sororities on campus. And when the group got together, we have students, faculty, staff, alumni, and all of them, we have affiliated members from each fraternity and sorority, as well as non-affiliated students and alumni, to be able to really look at this complicated conversation. So when we got together, we all acknowledged that it was really complicated to make a decision without data, because there's differences in generations and how the generations of alumni feel, their experiences. The diversity of the fraternity houses makes it complicated. The needs for plot spaces for our NPHC organizations. There's differing societal norms today than there was even when even many years ago when I was in college. And the inventory of attractive living spaces on and around Stetson's campus also complicates the conversation. So we decided to slow down the conversation and study our community to find out what has worked well in the past, what is working now, and what is not working for our current students. We decided to get the data that we need to plan for a Greek community that will thrive into the future. So we also know that this survey will help us get stories for the marketing that Renee talked about that we are doing with our current students and their parents. The parents are an important part of this as well. They need to understand the impact that Greek life, the positive impact that Greek life has on our students. This data will also show us about our Greek alumni who are engaged in volunteer leadership positions at Stetson. For example, did you know that 60% of our trustees are Greek affiliated?
I did know that.
Yep. And when we look at the rest of our advisory boards for the other colleges, 50% of our advisory board members are Greek affiliated. We're also getting some really great stories coming in through the survey, and we will be doing focus groups as well that are talking about that magic. Rich George talks about it, that there's magic that happened for him in his fraternity in the 70s when it was Kent State, it was Vietnam. They didn't necessarily like Stetson. It was a generation of fight the power, but he loved his fraternity. We had another trustee who did the survey and said, I am a trustee because of my affiliation with my fraternity. That's what kept me around. So it's the Greek ethos is what we call the study, because we're looking at what is the positive that is built up through the fraternities and sororities, get the data, get the stories behind it so we can plan into the future. So each of you as Greek alumni should have received the survey in your inbox if we have your current information, which we should because you're all on here. And if you did not get to take it and you would like to, Amy's going to pop the survey link into the chat for you all to hop on after this or after your next decade reunion and take the survey. We plan to keep the community updated through the alumni newsletter that goes out every month, as well as other channels, because we want you to know the progress we're making. And we want you to know that this is to lift up the Greek system, because we want to get it back to the percentage of Greek life when you all were on campus, if that's what our students want. It's about listening to our students today. So I want to thank also Jill Jinks, who graduated in 1979. It was a Tri-Delt, yeah, Tri-Delta. Jill is a doctoral student at the University of Georgia, and she is actually helping us lead this study because she's an expert in the methodology that we're using to conduct the survey. So we're super grateful to her and to Rich and to Maureen as our board chair of the trustees, who are really interested in this project and making sure that we're really looking at this in depth and have some really good data to continue. How'd I do, Renee? Did I miss anything?
One thing I would add to that is after we look at the data, after the focus groups, we're bringing back our working group together to then kind of formulate a plan for what does the future for fraternity and sorority facilities look like. And so again, bringing back the current students, the faculty, staff, alums in that conversation to then really look at it, because we don't just want to kick the can down the road, add some fresh paint to these facilities, because we know that's not the solution. So we really are looking at the future. And so we realize that this isn't a plan that next year will take effect. And we know that this will take a little bit of time to really figure out, and we want what's best for the students.
Yeah,
That's why we're here. It's their experience, and we truly want what's best for them.
exactly. Thank you for saying that. And we may find out that there's something missing. Maybe we're missing a large social space that needs to be incorporated. And then we want to build around the positive aspects of Greek life to emphasize those and lift them up. So we don't know where we're going to get, but we promise that this is a really good survey with high integrity, and we're going to have some great data to lead us forward. Thanks, Renee.
I think this is a fabulous project that you're doing with Jill. The data that I've seen on Greek life and what it means going forward after graduation is really phenomenal, and even up to graduation. I mean, people who are in fraternities and sororities tend to graduate at higher rates. They retain it at higher rates. They contribute as alumni at higher rates. They volunteer at significantly higher rates. The interesting thing to think about would be, what is it about the Greek experience that makes that true? Is it being part of an affinity group that makes one feel connected? Is it that the socioeconomic group of fraternity and sorority folks tends to be higher than the average bear because they have more disposable income to spend on dues and things like that? Just what is it? And should we be supporting not only Greek organizations, but other affinity groups on campus that provide students with that all important sense of belonging?
That's a great question. Absolutely.
So I'll be interested in that as we work through this is the year of strategic planning for us, coming up with a new strategic plan. And, I think that's some of the key issues that we face. How do we keep active contributing alums? How do we improve our retention and graduation rates? How do we give students that sense of belonging, especially in a world of COVID? I mean, it doesn't get much more challenging than that.
Absolutely. And what Maureen, what you just stated is exactly what our working group was talking through, and why we decided to slow down and try to figure out that ethos. What is it that makes that true? And hopefully we'll get some data that helps us lead to draw those conclusions. And then I wrote down the aspect about how does that translate to other affinity groups? Because we do know that our sporting teams, for example, athletic teams, they have some similar higher statistics. Our fraternity,
they're bonded in fire.
yeah, exactly. So absolutely.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see in the survey when it's done, if the experience is different for fraternities from sororities. I mean, I'm old as dirt. So I was, one of those ones that was in a sorority when we just had an apartment in the Panhellenic building across the street. And the fraternities from my era, I graduated in 76, from my era, in my observation, which is but one data point, seem to have stronger ongoing camaraderie than the sororities. I don't see the sororities getting together annually like I see the Pikes getting together every single year at homecoming, taking over the elusive grape on Friday night, which is where I will be Friday night. You know, I don't see the sororities doing that. Maybe it's just my sorority that's not doing it. You know, we've occasionally gotten together, but nothing like what the Lambs and the Pikes and some of the others have done and continue to do.
And I want to comment on that. I also see that, and just talking specifically at Stetson here, but one thing that I find very interesting is I see a lot more sorority alums volunteering to be advisors with the chapter compared to the fraternities. So we see a lot more individual help compared to the, oh, let's get together every year type of thing. And so I find that very fascinating.
So we're better at helping and they're better at partying. Is that the bottom line?
I mean, I'm not going to say yes, but
cutting to the chase.
maybe a little bit.
Maybe some truth in that.
A little.
I think the fact that they live together in houses, and you know, my roommate Alice Smith was a tried-out. I don't know if you knew her, Kathleen, but you know, she was a tried-out, and most of us, we were just all in it together. And, you know, your social circle was a lot wider when you were in a sorority than it was if you were in a fraternity, I think.
I would agree. That is still true to this day, because the fraternities tend to just stick with their brothers, whereas sororities are like, how many fraternities can I get to know? Who can I get to know? It definitely has that bigger circle.
Even though they're now living in houses.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Amy, would you say that since you graduated in what year?
Me?
Yes, Amy Davis. Yeah.
Oh, I was trying to unmute. 2004 for myself.
Have you seen sororities getting together like the fraternities do? Because you had the houses then.
Yeah, I think it's interesting also being the one putting together the homecoming schedule every year from the alumni side of things. I collect the information from the Greek organizations to put on our master schedule, and the fraternities have multiple events throughout the week and weekend, sometimes starting on Wednesday or Thursday evenings. And then the sororities choose to keep it to maybe an open house at their houses on Saturday, and then something before the football game or a presence at the football game on Saturday as well. Whereas the men are all over having multiple events throughout the weekend. So it is interesting to, as soon as you mentioned that, Maureen, I can see exactly what you are referring to. I think the women are also involved in a lot of other organizations as well. So they might be visiting different events or not hosting as large of events as the men do maybe. So that is an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I never hear anything from the Pi Phis. And, you know, two of us on the board of trustees are Pi Phis from my era, myself and Susan Brockway, who chairs Academic Affairs Committee.
Yeah.
I've never heard a peep from them. I think there was one year, and this must be 15 years ago, a bunch of us got together and we went over to the house because we wanted to see the house. We'd never seen the house. But that's the only time I've ever been in it or been to any event there.
Yeah. I notice a lot of times too, the sororities do more formal ritual style events. So they celebrate anniversaries, pinnings. So if there's a 50th reunion pinning that somebody notifies the chapter about, or anniversaries of their chartering or their houses, I've noticed them do a lot more celebrations in regards to that. I know Pi Kappa Phi for the fraternities, they were supposed to do their centennial celebration, I think was supposed to be this year. So they were going to have a large presence this year, but they're pushing it forward, obviously, to next year. But I noticed the men do celebrate some of the large chapter anniversaries, but the sororities tend to also have smaller rituals for different classes as well, and they're more intimate events than some of the other ones too.
Yeah, I get invited to pike parties every year. Never to pie fight.
Aw. Renee and I will work on that.
I was just going to say, this is great feedback that I'm able to bring back to the chapters to let them know alums do want to get involved. I was talking, it was about a week ago, I was at the Daytona NPC alum chapter as their guest speaker, and I was doing a Q&A with them. And that's what a bunch of the questions were. How can we get involved with our chapter, whether we're local or not? And that's something that I want to bring to our Stetson community is how can we re-engage our alums, especially now in this virtual world that COVID has helped us gain better understanding of, is doing, whether you're not able to come in person, but let's do a virtual tour of the facilities so you can see it. Showing virtual, the composites on the wall so you can look back at your 1970s composites and connect with people or be like, oh yeah, I forgot about that sister or brother, and reach out to them. So I want to help our chapters kind of facilitate that, get those ideas in their heads. And it's something I know in the spring semester I'm going to be pushing with them, since right now a lot of our organizations are currently transitioning leadership. And so I want to make sure our new leadership in January, when they have that spunk, good energy, really go-getters, and make sure that I bring it up to them then as well.
Maureen, your conversation brings up something really important, which is those of us who've had the live-in chapter experience understand the power of it. And we want our students to have a positive experience in their chapters. And that's why we really are trying to dig into this. And I see we have Jamil on, who was in Alpha Phi Alpha, who had, I'm guessing when he was on campus, they were in a house as well. And that experience of living together and building that affinity and those friendships and that love, as Rich George calls it, he calls his fraternity friendships, they're based in love. And so I'm glad you brought that up, Maureen, because that's something that a number of us are wondering about. How does the current this generation, how do they want to live together and build community like we were able to experience, so that Greek life sustains for decades at Stetson?
Amazing how strong the bonds.
Hi, Jamil.
Hey.
Hi.
So we had a very small chapter, and it was an off-campus house, but that was what we had. It was 5 of us living in the house.
Yep. What year did you graduate?
2001.
2001. Okay. Right before I got to Stetson.
Yes, ma'am.
But that living together is that important to building you guys' relationship?
See, our fraternity life is very different than what most others is, because the NPHC, we're still active. I have a fraternity meeting right after I get off this call.
Awesome.
We're still, I'm still very active. I was president of our alumni chapter in Orlando for 3 years. So our experience is very, very different in the way that we're still connected, on a daily. I talk to my frat brothers every day.
Yeah.
About something or another. So it's a very different experience. And even matriculating from college to, the professional world, we still stay in contact. We have chat groups and all kinds of stuff, and we're always communicating.
Yeah, that I think did you know Michael Davis? Was he a first-year student when you graduated?
I pledged Mike, yes.
Yes.
He was so he was right after me, him with Cameo and Renee and yeah, so I pledged that group, yes.
That's right. And Michael is now a board of trustee with Maureen. So he's in that 60% of
He's awesome.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Okay. Glad to hear that.
Thanks, Jamil.
All
I love
right,
that
y'all
Kathleen.
take care. Sorry, I got to jump off.
Thank you for joining us.
No problem. Thank you. Have a great night.
gonna say I love in the chat that Kathleen wrote that she's currently an active in the Tri-Delt alum chapter in Lakeland. That's awesome. We love hearing that. So, oh yeah, Vicky.
So I also graduated in 1976, but I did not pledge until my FIMU until my sophomore year. My roommate, Maureen, I remember your name, but no reason for you to remember mine. I was a music major, so I was stuck in the practice room a lot. My college roommate for 4 years was Martha Cash, and maybe you remember Martha.
Yeah, I do.
Anyway, we have kept in touch. I played for her son's wedding a couple of years ago. Anyway, so at some point, and I don't even remember what year this was, the FIMU chapter disbanded or something, and then there was one year when we were all at homecoming, and a bunch of us were at homecoming that we actually went to see the house. And I don't remember if the chapter was active at that point, but I do remember seeing all the pictures, and it was like, oh wow, that's a blast from the past. I remain close with Judy Clayton Ward, who was a year ahead of me, lives in DeLand. She and her husband Bill, who graduated same year I did. Sue Neeson Peck, who graduated with me, was a FIMU, and she and her husband have been working with Wycliffe translators forever, Bible translators, and so we remain close. She and Martha and I lived in a house our senior year off campus, but so I would certainly, so there was certainly a period of time where there was no communication from FIMU because the chapter had disbanded, and somehow my name dropped off the list or something. I don't know. At this point, I still have pandemic brain, so there are a lot of things I don't remember. Plus, I'm old. So anyway, I would love just to stay in touch. The plan is for us to retire to DeLand probably within the next couple of years. Because it's inland, but it's close to the beach, and cost of living is still, compared to other places, pretty low. We're in an apartment in Decatur, Georgia. Been here since February of 2017. That's a long story. Anyway, so I hope to get back to, I will get back to DeLand eventually, and maybe sooner rather than later. But I'm sorry that I don't see some of those people I mentioned on this call, and maybe they'll pop into the 70s decade reunion at 7, because it would, and I see them, fairly frequently anyway. But this is fun, and I'm glad that I jumped on, and I'll fill out the survey.
It's great. It's great fun to see. It's great fun to see you, Vicky. I know you were a music major. I actually went through Stetson on a music scholarship. I played viola in the school orchestra. I was never any good, but as you know, they're always hard up for viola. So I got a scholarship, and that
Indeed,
going to Stetson possible for me. And so it was great.
Well, I will have to say and jump on that it is a goal of Renee and mine, to something that we've been talking about, is to increase the communication and engagement to our Greek alumni from our office. So from the Office of Alumni and Parent Engagement, to include more Greek information and updates in our monthly e-newsletter, to work with the marketing department to highlight more of our Greek students and what they're doing on campus and in the community. So sometimes the chapters, we feel like they do have a hard time reaching out to their alumni because they're not sure what to communicate, how to ask, how to talk, how to send those emails. But it's something we definitely need to work with them on and help them with. But in the meantime, how can our office and Renee's office work together and bridge that gap in the meantime, while we again work through the transition and leadership that Renee mentioned? So we're hoping to have an update or something in the November newsletter that'll go out next week. So there might be an update in there about Greek recruitment and how that went this year, a recap of the event, information about the survey, but then continue to engage via that newsletter every month as we build up the students' communication to their alumni as well. So that's a start that we're hoping to at least work on within the next few weeks as well.
That's great. You know, I think there's also an opportunity for philanthropy with alums.
Mhm.
So when I went to graduate school, to business school, I went to Harvard Business School, and they do it better than anybody. In your first year at HBS, you are in a classroom with 80 classmates and you are a section. The first year class is divided into 9 sections and they become your family. And it's like a fraternity / sorority. And you might like them or you might not like them, but they're like your family. And if they're in need, you deal with them for the next 50, 60 years. It's a very tight group and they do get together every 5 years, and there's an alumni newsletter that goes out, and there's a secretary for every section, and it's quite newsy about what everybody's doing and what their children are doing, and people are constantly getting together. But every section elects a fund agent before graduation and a section secretary who's responsible for rounding up news 6 times a year about what their section mates are doing. And that keeps everybody connected emotionally, socially. And the fund agent calls because people give to people. They give to causes, but they also give to people. And, you know, the fund agent calls you on the phone. How you doing? You know, and you're apt to say yes. No matter, I mean, you might vary the amount, but you're apt to say yes to a friend. So, you know, I think if Stetson were able to or has developed a really good database of who their alums are, and if they could inculcate that kind of thing in the various affinity groups, whether they be Greek or something else, that could carry on and keep people connected, I think it would do a lot of good things for the school in terms of creating volunteers, donors, connectedness, recruiters of students for the school. I mean, all around, I think it's a virtuous cycle.
And I would agree. And Maureen, you set me up for a really great segue. That was to the one of the final announcements that I would love to share, and it has to do with philanthropy and fundraising. So for those of you who don't know, every year during homecoming, we do have an annual competition for the Legacy Cup and the Heritage Cup. So you might have seen emails gone out about it, pictures of the cups being presented at homecoming, information on our websites. So every year since 2003, we've given out the Legacy Cup. And the Legacy Cup there's one for fraternities and one for sororities. And every year the winner gets named at homecoming. And it is the organization that has the highest percentage of alumni who give back to Stetson from the previous homecoming. So this year's winners or recipients of those cups, they've had the highest participation rate based on their alumni who've donated since last year's homecoming. And what the gentleman who led the charge for his organization for 14 years in a row is on this call, but I know he has done an amazing job at going through his data, all of his information, making sure we had all of the correct alumni coded as members of his organization. We had their information, sent out mass emails about it. So he is the epitome of volunteers for his affinity group and his organization. So I'm going to shout him out again, but Jason Maddox as member of ATO. ATO this year now has won for the 14th, I think, year in a row. They've won the Legacy Cup. There we go. I was right. Number 14. So they have their own trophy in their house, I believe, or we did up until recently have a trophy, which every year had ATO on it. And then this year we'll give them the most recent one for this year. That also, I think every plaque on that trophy has ATO on it. So once again, Jason, thank you for all that you've done for your chapter, for Stetson, for pushing that out there. And congratulations on your 14th now in a row, at least 14th Legacy Cup. And then for the, oh, go ahead.
What was the percent? What was the percentage?
I did leave that spreadsheet open because I knew you would ask. It's you're right now at 31%. So out of your 373 alumni so far, we've been able to process 117 of them have given back to Stetson this calendar year since last year's homecoming. So again, some of them are still coming in and being processed, but around 31.37% for ATO. And then for the sorority winner this year for Legacy Cup, it was Alpha Z Delta. So they won this year. And then about 3 years ago, we did create the Heritage Cup. So the Heritage Cup is based off of not percentage of alumni who've donated, but the dollar amount raised. So the total dollar amount donated by their alumni, again, from last year's homecoming. And this year for fraternities, the winner was Sigma Phi Epsilon. And for sororities, Pi Beta Phi. So Ms. Maureen, you mentioned that you are a member of that organization. So you all won this year. And then we'll work on getting trophies engraved, and the chapters are able to keep the trophies within the house until next year when we present them next year at homecoming. So hopefully next year we'll have, again, Renee and I have talked about an in-person Greek alumni event at homecoming where the trophies can be presented and more information can be shared with a larger group of alumni as well. So that congratulations to all the organizations that have won, and we'll get in touch with the students within the next week or so they can get their trophies as well. So that's my congratulations speech for everyone, thanking all of you as well from those organizations that have donated this year. And even if you are not within those organizations, we also thank you as well. Yeah. So we have about 7 minutes left. I know some folks have a 7 p.m. Zoom as well. Are there any other questions for Renee, Rena, or myself that anybody wants to, or comments to chat about?
No, I'd just like to thank you. This has been really informative. It's wonderful to hear what's going on and the work that you're doing. Really supports the strategy going forward. So I really look forward to seeing the results of it. And I did fill out my survey.
Yay.
And Jill has talked to me all about it too. So it's very exciting.